Hello, very good evening. 9:03 is the time. Normally at this time of the week, we talk to Emma Kenny. She doles out some advice to people with mental health issues. Today, we're going to do something a bit different because Alastair Campbell is with us. He's got a book out called Living. In fact, today is publication day.
It is.
Congratulations. Living Better, How I Learned to Survive Depression. And Stephen Fry says this book could save lives. So quite a big billing there. We're going to come on to that in a second, but I just want to ask you about what we were talking about in the last hour, because we have to get a little bit of politics into this.
You said you wanted to move it on.
But, I mean, this whole Tony Abbott situation, can you understand why the government want to possibly appoint him to some sort of advisory position?
Not really, no, because I think he was a truly hopeless Prime Minister. I think he was, I heard the discussion about his views, some of which some people will find truly objectionable, other people won't mind so much. I just think he was a terrible Prime Minister. And most of the Australians that I know, that's why they kicked him out. And I think, I just sort of feel Johnson's kind of trolling the nation the whole time. And we're talking about Tony Abbott, and it means that we don't talk about how he's, ballsing up an awful lot of the stuff that he's doing. So, look, I think Tony Abbott's just, he should be. And the idea there's nobody in Britain who can do that. And it's not that big a deal as well. It's not like you're talking about bringing in some sort of panjandrum to run the whole thing. He's not going to do that. So I think the whole thing's a bit of a silly distraction, but he shouldn't be involved.
Right, well, let's end our distraction and get on to why you've written this book. Now, we have talked over the last 10 years a lot about mental health. It features in your diaries a hell of a lot. Why have you decided to write this book purely on your struggle with coping with mental health?
Well, look, you've been in the publishing industry way longer than I have, and who knows? There's all sorts of complicated reasons. But if I try and strip it down, I made a documentary about depression a while back, and so just to give you one, for instance, I persuaded my own psychiatrist, which is quite a big thing for him to do, to sit down and talk to me as doing a kind of session with the cameras, okay, for that documentary. I think it made 6 seconds on the screen. I did all sorts of scientific experiments and what have you, and the really, really, really good ones got maybe a couple of minutes. So I sort of felt a bit frustrated. It was a good documentary and I was very proud of it, but I felt very frustrated that I had all this stuff that I'd done research-wise. So I thought that was the sort of starting point. Maybe I could use that for something else. And then as I got into it, I just decided, well, look, why don't I just explore my own depression in greater depth than I've done before? And then it sort of evolved into what it is, which is kind of half life story and half the search for a cure, which I don't think there is, which is why I've very carefully used the word survive depression rather than get rid of.
But it's living with it, isn't it? I mean, you say living better. It's actually living with it.
Yeah, I live better. I do live a better life than I did. And even though I had a bad depressive episode just a few weeks ago, just as the lockdown was, towards the end of that period, I still get it, but I deal with it better. Fiona, my partner, deals with it better. The family deals with it better. And that, I think, is because I have confronted it. And one of the other reasons I want to write this is because I look back at my own life, and okay, I've had a very interesting life and a good life in lots of different ways, but I can't help thinking for myself and Fiona that if back in my 20s, when I first realised I had problems, because I ended up in being treated for them in hospital, if I had known what I now know about mental health and mental illness, I think we would have handled it very differently and got more help. And so I hope that people who are now in their 20s and 30s, say, and maybe are struggling a bit, don't take as long as I did to kind of work it out. And I think I have worked it out. I've worked out that it's never going to go away. It will come and go. But I've worked out how to deal with it and how to stave it off more than I used to, and how to deal with it when it comes.
Alastair's going to be with us until 10. If you want to speak to him, ask him any questions, tell him about your experience. Maybe he's got some experience that he can help you with as well. 0345 6060 973. I read the piece in The Observer on Thursday, which was headlined, "I've finally learnt to live with my enemy." Is that how you have to view it, as an enemy?
Yeah, I didn't write the headline.
But it is a quote.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's sort of a quote. I mean, I've learnt to. Is it? I don't know if I see it as an enemy, because sometimes when I'm feeling kind of really good, I feel a lot of my energy comes from that. It comes from that something that's happening inside me as I come out of a depression. But I think in terms of, I see it as a force over which a lot of the time when it comes in on me, I don't have any control at all. So it is a bit like an enemy. And I say in the book, it's never always the same, but it has an almost physical manifestation for me. And it has a taste. And it's interesting how many people...
That was it. I remember reading that in the article. I thought, that's weird, that something that is psychological can have a taste.
Yeah, but do you know what's really strange is how many people have been in touch to say that they've got the same thing. Denise Welsh said, she sent me a message saying, I can't believe you've got the lead thing like I have. And it's this feeling that, you know when you've got a sore throat and you suck on a cough sweet to try and just get your mouth to feel a bit at ease. It's like that, but you're sucking lead. You're sucking something metallic, and it's horrible. It's really, really horrible. So it's got a taste. It's got a feel. It's got a weight. It comes in, and then it literally weighs you down. That's why I can often spot somebody's depression from the way they walk. I think with me, I'll tell you what's really interesting with me. Fiona spots this straight away. My voice weakens. As a physical entity, my voice sounds weaker than it normally does, and I might not even be aware of it. So it sort of takes you right over, and
you also talk about when you get up in the morning, your first thought is, right, is this going to be a 1 day, a 3 day, a 7 day, a 9 day? And if it gets to 9, that's when you know I think you say if it gets to 7, you've got problems.
I'm in trouble, yeah.
How do you actually calibrate that?
It's a sort of... I've kind of developed that over the years, and a lot of people think I've got it the wrong way round. That if life is about the pursuit of happiness and fulfilment, I should have 10 as the best and 1 as the worst. But I've got it the other way around. So 1 is a kind of state of total delirium, which I don't think exists in the real world. So I never allow myself to have 1. 2 is my absolute max, and 2 is dangerous. 2 for me is when I'm a bit off the scale manic, and I might end up just going a bit too far on things and getting a bit out of control. 3 and 4 is where I like to be. You'll be pleased to know it's where I was when I woke up this morning, and it's not shifted that much. 5 is kind of stable and it's okay. 6, 7, 8, I'm in trouble. And 9 is like, I kind of basically want to top myself. And 10, I don't allow 10, because 10 means you do top yourself. So that's my scale. And what I do is every morning when I wake up, I just have this, it takes seconds. How do I feel? And if I'm on 5 or 6, I'm conscious of it, and then I say, right, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. So I say in the book, and again, it's amazing how many men respond to this. Shaving. If you feel depressed, shaving's a chore anyway, right? If you do it like I do, like you do every day, it's a chore. There's no pleasure in it. But when you're depressed, it becomes way worse than a chore. It becomes a real challenge, and it can be exhausting. So I kind of say, right, I must shave. I've got this blind on the landing outside the bedroom.
I remember that from the documentary.
Yeah, and it's important to me. If I'm on a 5, if I go past the blind, by the time I'm at the bottom of the stairs, I'm on 6 and 7. I just know that. So I force myself to do it. And sometimes I'll slide down anyway. But so these little tactics, and they help. And then, the end of the book really is about this very, very simple idea that a woman in Canada gave me about how to view your life. And this, she calls it a jam jar theory. And it really just is a way of building your own ideas, mechanisms, things that mean something to you, so that as I feel I'm going into a plunge, I've got this little checklist of things I do. Now, it doesn't always work, but it's been really, really good. I mean, I've staved off plunges that probably would have lasted a week. I've got rid of them in a day. Sometimes it doesn't work at all. Sometimes I just get blown away. But then I say to myself, well, okay, that's what's happened this time, but I've been through worse.
So in an average year, how often does it strike?
Oh God, this year, where are we? In August, September. 6.
And it lasts for varying lengths of time?
Yeah, from very short to the period. The bout I had in lockdown was for me quite long. It was 3 weeks in the sort of 7-8 bracket, and that was pretty horrible. It's horrible for Fiona, and it's horrible for my kids.
And the whole thing, and some people will be aware of this and some people won't, but the thing that the video you put on Twitter about the Queen, now was that a 1 or a 2 or 3 episode, or was that a 7 or 8 episode?
That was 2 en route to 8.
Because that was, I mean, we talked about this on the podcast that we did together a couple of weeks ago, but that was something where I looked at that and I thought there really is something wrong here, and I was thinking, okay, we're not close friends or anything, but I email you, we text each other from time to time, and I was thinking, what do I do? Because I was actually really concerned about you.
Well, so were a lot of people, and of course, the thing about social media, I mean, just as the listeners know, because this isn't in the book, this was post writing the book, but I did have a manic spell during lockdown when I was on 3, sometimes takes me into 4. That's fine. That's what today's been like. Sometimes I go the other way. And I was doing this thing. I was walking around the heath with Fiona, with the dog in the morning, and I was singing national anthems, but I was changing the lyrics. I did Russian, American, German, French.
You could advise the BBC on the prom.
Well, what I was changing, it was during the Dominic Cummings thing when he was kind of, trolling the nation, and I changed the words that were all about Boris Johnson saying why I love Dominic Cummings. And I got home. Fiona was sort of getting a bit fed up with me, understandably. I went up to my office at the top of the house, and I wrote this. It went, I'll tell you what it was. It was God Save the Queen. It was God Save my gracious Dom. Long live my noble Dom. I love my Dom. Send him to face the press. That will clear up mess. Like Prince Andrew at Pizza Express. God save our Dom. So I thought it was quite funny. But then, worse, I put a suit on and I put my brother's guard's tie on.
Yeah.
And I put his medals on.
Yeah.
And that was just... And even as I was doing it, I was thinking, this is over the top. This is ridiculous. And then, of course, what happens with social media? Johnny Mercer, the Defence Minister, piled in. Loads of kind of people, this is a disgrace, And, of course, I fight for a bit. But then, in myself, I know I've just overstepped. You've
still got that little devil on your shoulder saying, go on.
Yeah, have a go. Yeah. Fight back. And then I'll tell you what happened. I think I said this to you on the podcast. Martin Sheehan, a former colleague in Number 10... who I now work with at Portland, he just phoned up and said, he always used to call me, well, he still does, he calls me Gaffer. And he said, Gaffer, do us a favour, put your phone down. And I did. And then, so that was 2. And then what happens after a spell like that? And that was the climax of it. And I knew it was happening, I knew it was coming. And then that's when I went into this sort of massive crash.
And how does... Actually, no, we're going to come on to this in a second because I've just looked at the time, so we'll just have a little short break now. In fact, before we do that, let me just read out this from Maria, who says, my best friend has depression. She describes it as waking up and the black cloud was sitting over her. She can't do anything when this happens. Years ago, I listened to a presenter on Radio 4 who had depression from a young man. He was in his 40s, and his answer to depression was that he knew it was coming, and though therapy came up with strategies to combat the cloud, my brother killed himself in December 2018. Male suicide is off the scale. Anything that can save lives is good. Well, Alastair, we'll be taking your calls in a moment as well. 0345 6060 973. 19 minutes past 9. Alastair Campbell's here talking about his book, Living Better. I think I saw you do an interview with Fiona, your partner, on the television the other day, and I remember that hour that we spent with her in the studio taking calls from listeners. Now, she has had a lot to put up with, and I think looking back, I suspect you're slightly surprised that you haven't split up at some point over it, because she has gone through the mill, hasn't she?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm quite good to live with, really, most of the time. No,
we only have your word for that.
Well, no, she's written a chapter in the book, as you know, and she says that She says it's difficult but never boring. Well, she also says she'd rather be not bored than bored. That I can be very good fun. That I'm very sort of loyal and caring and good in a crisis and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, she's had a lot to put up with, and I do think, I'm absolutely, as my daughter Grace tells me daily, God, you've lucked out. And I have, because I think at various points in my life, I can see points where I think a lot of women would have just said, no, I'm not having this, I'm not putting up with it. The first of which was the breakdown. I honestly thought when I had my breakdown, I thought that, we'd actually split up for a bit. We were not split up, but I'd moved into a hotel because we were just not getting on. And so when I was lying in this hospital bed, kind of paranoid and seeing things and hearing things and what have you, I was convinced of two things. One, I was going to lose my job. And secondly, that Fiona was going to leave me. And the next morning she walked through the door with her dad and she sort of said, oh God, what have you done now? And I knew she wasn't going to leave me. So yeah, I've been very, very lucky. There's no doubt about that.
And the pressure on your children as well, because obviously, even before you were in number 10, I mean, you were a public figure. You would appear on the media all the time when you were a journalist. And even since you've left number 10, I mean, your profile, if anything, has gone up, I guess. And the pressures on them during their childhood must have been great, even without your depression.
I don't know really, because I guess so. But I think a lot of people, we talk about pressure and, okay, there are pressured jobs, but I think everybody's dealing with different sorts of pressures. And I do think the kids have come through it pretty well, but, they've all had issues, and Grace has had really bad anxiety. Callum is a recovering alcoholic, and, it's been challenging at times for them. And I don't doubt, just as I've been a difficult person for Fiona to live with, I'm sure as a parent, it's brought its challenges as well. And, I think when you are in a full-on person, in a full-on job, and you're really kind of driven and stuff, I think we all kid ourselves that we can be good parents as well. You can try your best, and I tried my best. I've always tried my best, but within these confines of the fact that, I was away a lot, and I was working very long hours, and I didn't often see them in the morning, and all that stuff. And so yeah, I think that is difficult. But
what about your own childhood? Because I mean, I would imagine that the big episode that you've just talked about, that was obviously when you were much older. But did you experience much in your childhood? And you write in the book about whether it's genetic or not.
Well, the genetic thing has always interested me, and I was, because there has been suicide in the family, and there's been quite a lot of alcohol in the family, and what have you. So I was interested in that. And actually, the woman who gave me the jam jar theory, her profession, if you like, she's a genetic counsellor. And the thing is, mental illness is not genetic in the way that some conditions are, like Huntington's disease. You've got the gene, that's it. But you may have increased susceptibility. But, anybody who ever met my mother, for example, would say that she was the happiest person you'd ever met. Never had she just never stopped smiling, never stopped singing. I could introduce you to somebody that I knew was a truly horrible person, and she'd somehow find the nice thing in them and bring it out.
Yeah, my mother was the same.
Well, so and my dad was he was a vet. He was he could be grouchy, like most middle-aged men can be grouchy, but I don't think got depression. Drank a bit too much at times, but was by no means an alcoholic, far from it. So I don't know. I think that, and it's really interesting. There's a quote from one of my nephews in the book where he once says, because I was one of four, and he once says to my mum, "How come you two, she and my dad, produce four nutters when you're both the sanest people I've ever met?" And we have our issues. My oldest brother had schizophrenia. My second brother, he had, I think, similar issues to me, but never acknowledged them, and he's now dead, and I think that's one of the reasons. My sister had eating issues when she was younger, and then there's me. And so we've all had our issues.
Does it come from one side of the family?
Not entirely, but predominantly, yeah. Yeah, my dad's side, yeah. Yeah. And I've also had suicide. I write a chapter about my cousin who killed himself, and he was from my dad's side of the family as well. And that's, I wanted to, you asked earlier about why I wanted to write the book. I wanted to write about that. I wanted to write about suicide because I'm the patron of a charity for the Sanctuary for the Suicidal, the Maytree, who, by the way, are doing a football challenge at the moment where public figures such as yourself, Iain, all you've got to do is do something with a football for 40 seconds and upload the video for Maytree. Will you do that for me?
I will do, but I don't actually have a football.
I'll get you a football. And do you know why 40 seconds? Because every 40 seconds somebody kills themselves.
Really?
That is how bad the suicide rate is. So the point that the reason I wanted to write about my cousin Lackey, apart from the fact that we were very close growing up together, was that I remember when he died, just constantly hearing this refrain of people saying, God, it's so selfish to do that when you've got 3 young children. Didn't he think about that? And the point I'm making, I suspect, because I've had suicidal episodes where I've been suicidal ideation, you don't think about anything else. You think life will be better for them. So, that's one of the reasons I wanted to write about him.
And when you do get these depressions, I mean, does it literally feel like your body's shutting down, or do you? I mean, I remember reading. I mean, I've read all your diaries, and I mean, there's some pretty horrible arguments that you would have with Fiona. I mean, not necessarily during those, but it's maybe leading on to that. And I know you, when I said on Twitter on Saturday that I'd been with my partner for 25 years and we'd never had a row, you genuinely can't believe that, can you? Or you just think it's weird?
I just sort of think, how could you not have had a kind of
Well, it depends what you mean by a row. I mean, we bicker, we argue, but we've never had a door-slamming, sweary, you're a effing whatever. We've never had one of those.
Wow.
But I know you have, because you've written about them.
You've never had a plate thrown at your head as you're walking through the kitchen door.
Nothing like that at all.
What about?
Which I'm very grateful for.
Well, I don't blame you. But I mean, I think.
But some people rather thrive on that kind of thing, don't? And there are people who love rowing and then all the making up.
No, yeah, I'm sure there are. I don't like having rows. Neither of us like having rows, but we've definitely had our share of big rows, and we still have them from time to time, but nothing like we did.
But is that because Fiona now understands much better than maybe she did?
I think partly, yeah. And the other thing that there's a lot in the book about my psychiatrist David, and I didn't stumble upon him till 2005, and he was really interesting because he worked out very quickly that the pressures in my life were I'd left government, but Tony Blair was trying to get me back in. Gordon Brown wanted me to go. That was a big pressure. I used to spend more time talking to David about Tony and Gordon, almost as much time as I did about anything else. But he also knew that Fiona was incredibly important. So he actually at one point said, look, I think Fiona should come to these sessions as well. And, that was tough at times. But what I think it did do, he really helped Fiona to understand that my depression was in no way her fault. Because I think for 30 years, she had taken it on herself as like there's something wrong with her. Because I seem fine when I'm talking to you or I'm talking to the editor of the Times or Tony Blair, whatever. The minute that phone call's over, I'm back on the sofa lying down and grunting monosyllabically.
So you put on an act sometimes?
No, I think you just get through it somehow. And then when you're with the person that you feel you can be literally emotionally naked in front of, you do. So I would be there thinking, why can't she just see that I don't want to talk, I don't want to be with her, just leave me alone. And it was really interesting. One of the best things that happened out of the BBC documentary, I got contacted out of the blue. I honestly thought it was a joke, and it was somebody saying Eric Clapton would like to talk to you about your film. I thought, that sounds all right. And I told him this when we met. I told him this story that the closest I've ever. One of the two occasions when I've really felt I'm having to force myself not to, end it all was actually at an Eric Clapton concert at the Albert Hall.
Wow, what a story!
Yeah. And
what did he say?
Well, it was kind of something amazing about us coming together. He was like, he just sort of listened, and I told him the story because he's had all sorts of, mental health stuff. And but yeah, and what it was that, and Fiona, I don't think Fiona would do this now, but friends of ours had got us tickets to go and see Eric Clapton. And I said to Fiona, I woke up and I said, look, I really don't want to go out there. I can't face it. And it was the classic thing of, they'll be upset and they'll, they want you to go and da-da-da. And I went there. I literally went, as he was playing, as he was performing on stage, I was walking round. We were up in the gods and I was walking round and round and round. And it was really, really hard to kind of keep control of my own mind. And, so Eric and I had a right old chinwag about that.
It's amazing the people that you meet, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, we are going to come to your calls in a moment because we've got quite a lot of people that want to talk to you about various things. I'm looking at the different subjects here, so we'll come to those in a couple of minutes. Alastair Campbell is here. His book is called Living Better, How I Learned to Survive Depression. Let's go to your calls. Karen is a first-time caller from Malden in God's own county of Essex. Hello, Karen.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for taking my call. I just want to say, I know this sounds really silly, I just want to thank you for saying what you've said, because I suffer from depression. I'm on medication, which probably isn't a very strong one. And hearing you say about the iron, the metal taste in your mouth, it just clarified that I'm not going mad. I've been to the doctors numerous times and they've said to me, it's reflux. And I think to myself, no, it's not. It's something I'm tasting. And they just won't take that on board. And you've just made me think there is someone out there who knows what I'm going through, which it's made me smile, to be honest.
Oh, good.
I feel it's just, I can't put it into words how grateful I am that you were on the radio saying what you said. And the numbers thing, because I've never been to see anyone because I couldn't get on the list. And when you said about the numbers, it clarified how I feel. I've never thought about it in numbers.
Well, I hope that helps. I mean, I do it every morning. And the thing about the lead, I mean, I think that, a lot of doctors do get depression, I suspect. But I think if you haven't known it, I can see why they would say it's probably reflux, because it sort of is that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
But you're not the first person to say to me that you've got that lead taste in your mouth, and there must be something going on there. If you do that and I do that and Denise Welch do that and lots of other people do.
Could it not, I'm trying to find this, there was a text earlier on saying, well, could that not be a mineral deficiency or something?
Listen, I'm not a doctor, but I don't know, but it's part of the package that comes to me when I'm feeling really, really bad.
Well, that's how I feel when I start feeling like I'm going down the rabbit hole, so to speak, like Alice in Wonderland. That I know once that taste is there, I'm going to have a bad few days.
Yeah. But I think in a funny sort,
someone like yourself saying that happens to you, it's made me feel, I'm so glad I turned the radio on.
Well, we're glad you turned the radio on.
Good.
It's always nice to bring a smile to someone's face, even when we're talking about mental health, isn't it? So, which, funnily enough, I mean, even when we do this regular hour with Emma, you get some absolutely traumatic calls, but there's always something to grab onto where people can. And we had last week, we had so many. I asked how people had coped with anxiety through COVID, and we had so many really uplifting calls, actually.
But it's the other thing in the book is that, because the point you make as well, that if you can't get on the list, and the guy that I see him, I pay him, and I can afford to do that. And one of the other things that I've written the book for is I've actually written a lot about the exercises that we've done. So one of the purposes I hope for the book is like you've got something out of me talking about the lead thing. I hope that people will get specific ideas from the exercises that I've done, and they haven't all helped me, but some of them have.
Alastair says, just brought your book. So it's worth coming in just for the sake of Alastair.
That's one. Well done, Alastair.
Karen, thank you so much. Let's go to Katie in Stanmore. Here's a new caller. Hello, Katie.
Hi there. Hi.
Hello. Hi.
Thanks for having me on. I just wanted to say, first of all, it's fantastic to hear from such a high-profile person as yourself, Alastair, and especially a man to talk about depression. As a mum of 4 kids, I've got 3 boys and a daughter, and one of my boys suffered a very bad bout of depression last year. And there's been 4 touch points in our lives. I mean, I've got, you say you're one of 4. My father's a surgeon and has suffered from depression. I've had perimenopausal depression, and then my son has suffered from depression. And I think there is this, which is, I don't know, well, the menopause isn't necessarily genetic, but I think there is a link, that there is some susceptibility, as you said. Yeah. I think I wanted to bring something positive to this conversation, because I think when people talk about depression, it always sounds like doom and gloom. And actually, bizarrely, lockdown for us as a family has been a blessing in some ways, because my son was midway through A-levels and not able to even get to school. And actually having this time in lockdown has been amazing for us as a family, because he's had all the right therapy and help that he's needed. And like you, he's an aspiring not an aspiring politician, although he did politics, but he's a writer, and he's used this time to write and to read, write plays, write books. And I have another son who's got together with a group of 10 kids through their love of music, and they've all been suffering with their own mental health through lockdown. They've actually formed a group called Generation Z and brought out a song called Strong, and it's all about the mental health impact of this sort of COVID, pandemic lockdown.
Which is going to be huge.
Well, it's massive, and actually there's, I applaud you for talking about it, because boys they're embarrassed to talk about it. They try and be, the whole point of the name of the song Strong is men always think they've got to be strong. And it takes role models like you to actually, say it's good to talk about mental health. So, thank you, so much for sort of putting yourself out there, in the public and writing this book and, inspiring a younger generation of males to, go and get help. And but there's, I think COVID lockdown for teenagers in particular, I mean, for all of us, the mental health effect is huge. I find it quite worrying, actually, when I see the effect it's had on, the kids in my kids' friendship group. Yeah. But I don't know if there's sort of any advice you can sort of, give, because I'm hoping some of the kids will be listening to you about, dealing with this kind of back to school anxiety and sort of low mood and nervousness about having to go back but not feeling safe.
I mean, I do think you've well, thanks for all the kind things you've said, but I think that, if we could just be open about how we feel about these things. So, funny enough, when we were out walking this morning, we saw this young girl who was going to school. And it was obvious. I could sense her sort of nervousness, and I think that just admitting that is so important, and admitting that you don't feel great, and finding the right person to say that to. It sounds to me like you're the sort of parent and the sort of family where you do have these conversations, but some young people find it really difficult to talk to their parents about this. They find it difficult to talk to their siblings about it. So find the person that you can talk to, because I just think that I feel one of the reasons I do this is because actually I feel better when I talk about it. I feel better myself when I'm out there.
That was something I was going to ask. Whether you talk about it so much in public because you are a high-profile person, so you think you've got a responsibility to do it, or whether it actually helps you as well.
Both. I think I've got. Look, I'm not in the political scene in the way that I was. This government wouldn't have touched me with a barge pole. For the last few years, the Labour Party's not really been bothered about what I've got to say or do. So I think this is an area where I can still make a difference, where the skills that I've got in terms of campaigning and writing and building arguments, I can bring that to this debate. And, you know, it is really, really humbling to hear people who say that you just by expressing yourself in a certain way, you can, you know, you've got it written on the wall downstairs. You know, it's how you make people feel. And when there is so, particularly with COVID, I think the COVID is going to, you just think about the people who've been working on the front line, the people who lost their loved ones without being able to see them, the people who are worried now about their jobs as the recession comes. This is going to be horrific. The exams thing caused so much kind of psychological distress for so many young people and their parents. So that is going to, it's something we've got to confront. And, you know, without getting too political, I don't particularly trust this government. I don't think they get the mental health agenda in a way I'd like to see them do it. Therefore, we're actually going to have to do an awful lot of this for ourselves. And that's kind of where I've got to.
Well, you're listening to Alastair Campbell, who somebody says, doctor on the radio dishing out advice saying, I'm not a doctor. He's not a doctor. He's Alastair Campbell.
He's a spin doctor.
Yes, he's a spin doctor.
He's not a real doctor.
Anyway, more from Alastair and you in just a second. At 9:48 on LBC, Alastair Campbell is here talking about his book, Living Better. I see on Amazon it's the 23rd. Number 23 on the bestseller charts. That's really good.
It was 4 yesterday.
Was it? Well, you're selling.
That was after Lorraine and BBC Breakfast. And let's see whether LBC.
Well, let's see if we can propel you back into the top 20. I have to say, I've never got quite to those dizzy heights, but there we are. Right, James is in Collier's Wood. Hello, James.
Oh, hello, Ian.
Hello.
Yes,
what would you like to say?
When I first came on at the start of your programme, or the start of this section, I haven't had suicidal thoughts myself. You then went on to describe it. I missed it because I was talking to your producer, but I think Alastair graphically explained about his brother, and I'm wondering whether he'd had suicidal thoughts. Perhaps I missed it.
No, it was my cousin who took his own life. You're saying whether I've had suicidal thoughts?
Yeah.
I have, yeah, I do. Did quite recently, and it's what I do. I write, you know, in some detail in the book. In this is when I'm very, very down, and particularly if I can't sleep as well, I go into this phase where I literally sort of plan my own funeral, and it's a kind of, you know, it's a very, very strange thing, because it's almost like, because I feel dead, I feel like I'm dead already, and therefore I'm planning my funeral. And then there's other times when I'll be out and about, and you just sort of think, I can't cope, I can't face it. I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty confident I would never. I don't know if you heard me talking about my scale. 10 is, as it were, when you take your own life. I don't think I would ever do that, but I've totally had the feelings that I understand when people do, and I hate it. As I said earlier, I hate it when people talk about suicide as being selfish. I think it's the absolute ultimate in the pain of mental illness.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah, James, what's your response to what Alastair just said?
Well, I would say that I'm not surprised that Alastair's depressed. I mean, as a lying war criminal responsible for a million deaths in Iraq,
there we go.
I wonder.
Well, there you go. We can talk about it another time. I've regularly talked to Iain about Iraq, so you call in again another time. We'll have a nice chat.
Ben in Leeds says, genuine question without any judgment about the event, but I am keen to know what impact, if any, the decisions you advised on about the invasion of Iraq and the subsequent fallout from that has had on your mental health. I think that is actually a fair question, isn't it?
I do, yeah. And I think that, look, my depression's predated my time with Tony Blair, and my depression's obviously predated that. I think the pressure, and I don't think it's a coincidence that one of the worst depressions I've ever had was after I left Downing Street in 2003. Now, part of me might say that's because I left and I suddenly lost all purpose in my life, and I had to kind of, you know, rebuild a kind of professional existence. And then the other part of me says, well, that period was particularly difficult because of that decision. How you unpick all that and how you unbundle that, I don't know. But for sure, you think about it, and I don't take any offence to that sort of question at all, because I think you wouldn't be human if you didn't think about those
the
things.
whole David Kelly story. I mean, that must have affected you in that way, surely.
Without a doubt. I mean, it was that period. Apart from the deaths of people that I'm very close to, I never met David Kelly, but apart from family and friends that have died, that was the worst period of my life. And that was also the point at where again, it's in my diaries where I just said, I've just got to get out of this. I cannot be in this place anymore. And these things are bound to affect you.
Andrew in Manchester says, I've really disliked Alastair since the 90s because of his political views and also nasty at times, causing lots of trouble. I wanted Emma on after him tonight to help get over your show, but amazingly, he's been fantastic tonight.
There you go.
So you've got some converts here. So honest, he should stay away from politics and carry on being a nice person.
Well, but we are what we are.
It's a virus, politics, isn't it? You can't quite get rid of it.
I think it's hard. It's hard. Well, David, my psychiatrist, he thinks that my addiction to politics and political campaigning, he calls it my demon. He thinks being, that sense of being dragged back into the political debate the whole time. So, yeah, but, you can't not do what you feel compelled to do. And so I don't like actually this idea. It's like I remember when Ed Balls was doing Strictly Come Dancing, and people were saying, why couldn't he have been like this before? Well, he was like that before. It's just that he didn't do Strictly Come Dancing. Why do you hate him when he's a politician, but you like him when he's messing around on the telly? And so I'm not going to stop thinking what I think politically.
Someone texts here, whilst I am Mr. Campbell's poorest fan, it's a strange expression, a poorest fan. He is so right about the terrible chore and struggle that shaving becomes during depressive episodes. Equally, when they pass, one cannot wait to shave, and it's a joy. The mind is a fascinating but at times cruel organ. Well, that never a truer word spoken there. This is another one. Depression feels like a constant hangover where you're stuck trying to rev the engine but the handbrake is on. I love the days when it's not like that and really appreciate them because the dark days are just around the corner again. That's actually quite sad, isn't it? And you probably relate to that because you know that it's going to happen again. You know that at some point it is going to come back.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. But I think from my perspective, having that thought that it will come back, I think it helps me keep it away longer. I've noticed recently that the gaps between the bouts have been getting longer. Now, whether that's to do with age, whether it's to do with the different sort of life, I don't know. But I've definitely noticed that, and I think it's because I've just done an awful lot of work to confront it.
Paul in Rossendale says, I don't know if I have depression, but does waking up with a very heavy head and a headache mean that that's a sign of depression? Do you experience that?
Heavy head, yes. Headache, no. So, look, I think if you're worried about it, I really, really do think it's worth going and asking somebody about it. But the sense of the head feeling heavier than it normally does, definitely, I feel that.
Tom in Glasgow says, Alastair, you're so brave. I'm proud of you. Wasn't a fan of your government. However, I'm out pruning my tomato plants and I'm blown away by listening to you. All the best to you and yours.
Isn't it dark?
It's probably got a light in the greenhouse.
I would have. Is that where the tomato plants?
Yeah,
okay.
I imagine so.
Can I just say, I'm very thankful and grateful for that comment, but I don't like this brave thing. I don't feel it's brave. I feel that if we say it's brave, that must mean somehow that it's a very special and risky thing to do. And I worry that stigmatises, that actually nobody says it's brave anymore to say, I've had cancer. It's just a fact. It's a medical fact. And I want to get to a place where it's just a medical fact that, some people get depression, some people are OCD, some people are bipolar, some people, have schizophrenia. And that is it. We don't define them by it. So I appreciate the comment, but I don't think we should say
it is interesting, though, because I think whenever anybody talks about some unusual episode in their life or something that they, particularly somebody in the public eye, people do use that word. And when I talked about the sexual assault that I experienced many, many years ago, I got a load of this, say, "Oh, you're so brave to talk about it." I thought, no, I'm not. It didn't traumatise me. It doesn't traumatise me now. It's nothing brave about talking about it. I've only really talked about it because somebody picked it up and I thought, well, okay, a lot of other people have gone through this, so I will talk about it.
Yeah, and I think that's the right approach. And I do think if we can get to a place where we just feel we can talk openly about how we feel. And actually, I think I did this series of interviews for the book, and Josh Whitcomb said something very, very interesting. He said that how that sort of small talk, "How are you?" in COVID, in the coronavirus context, it's become almost like an existential question. And actually, that question, answered genuinely at the moment, throws up some very, very interesting answers. And I think that's the conversation we should have.
John says, depression is still a taboo. I work in construction as a commercial manager and companies are very demanding. Most nights I'm working till 8 o'clock. I get no support from line managers, and yet my company tick a box by promoting their support, in inverted commas, for mental health support.
Yeah.
It's not taken seriously enough, and it's a facade by a lot of construction firms. All they're interested in is making money, and until you know someone who's committed suicide, you don't understand the trauma it causes. Keep up the good work.
Well, I think I think some employers are great, but a lot are not. And I do think that the government's key, employers are key, and individuals are key. And you're absolutely right. There's lots of good companies talk the talk on this, but actually genuinely looking after the well-being of their workforce is not yet anywhere near where it should be.
Final text for Damien, who says, I couldn't stand Alastair when he was part of Tony Blair's New Labour juggernaut, but I've met him on 3 separate occasions and he's the nicest man you could meet.
Oh.
Well, there we are. I thought we'd end with an uplifting one. Well, thank you so much for coming
My pleasure.
again. I hope the book does really well. It really deserves to. It's called Living Better, How I Learned to Survive Depression. It's published by John Murray in hardback at $16.99.